And this is where I wish I had a smaller boat. This week should be a lot sunnier than last week, so I'm gonna continue on the hull painting on the port side. And over here, Marcus, over there, he's gonna start fairing or applying fairing compound to the roof of the pilot house so we can finally leave it mint, painted, and ready. Now it's time to paint the port side. I've done a lot of learning. I've realized it's very difficult. The main difficulty, or the main thing that will improve the painting itself, is getting the mixture right with the thinner. So if you've got too much thinner, it will drip. If you don't put enough thinner, it'll be too thick. So that's the thing I've been playing around with a lot. It looks very scruffy now. We haven't put the top under the waterline, as under the waterline we're gonna sand anyway. But everywhere else where we shouldn't have any paint is topped off. Gun's nice and clean, or the pistol, whatever you want to call it. Paint's ready, and I'm going to start getting to it. So I don't know how to do it. Maybe next time I'll put some cling film over here, because halfway through this is so dirty. And then I can't see what I'm painting anymore. Everything just looks grey, and I think I finished my job already. And then I take my glasses off, and nothing's painted. Everything but the boat's painted.
Ready? Have fun!
I'm gonna wrap this up for today. It's got about, I don't know how many layers, I just made sure it's all covered. Clean the gun with some thinner. This will then dry tomorrow, like I said, top it up with paste and then go over again if we need to. But I think that's about it.
Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. As you can see behind me, we are painting above the waterline and not painting under, because here is where the anti-fouling will go. So let's talk about the waterline. The only real way to know that the waterline is correct is by putting the boat in the water. But if you look around us, you'll see that that's not really a possibility for us. I know that in most yards, all the boats are in their own place, and if anything, you use the travel lift, go down, up, and that's it. But here is not the case. The shipyard has 2 cribs. They're all busy. We are on the side, on supports. It was quite a maneuver to put us here. We can't just mess the whole schedule of which boats being lifted, which boats going back to the water, because we want to test our waterline. Once we go to the water, if it's very wrong, too wrong, incredibly wrong, we can just bring it back up once we're there and fix it. So we're really not worried about how the waterline is looking. We're hoping we made a job that is good enough, but we are open to the possibility of it being very wrong and us fixing it later.
Anyway, that's off because we're not going to be able to paint today, because we're going to just sand it down, let the fairing compound dry. Tomorrow it's going to rain, which is why we're not painting today or tomorrow. When it's another few days of no rain, I'm going to tape top again and paint. Nico's going to be working on this. Later I'm going to come down and sand the chamfer, because I can see there's some fairing compound that was left still, and I'm going to really get rid of it. I'm going to go and do that until MP arrives with the sink, which is going to be installed in the loos, or the heads, and then the day's just going to continue like that.
challenge for you. If you spot a kite in any moment of this episode, comment below. It's a game.
Why is this all black? This is what we call in Brazil xadrez. It's just a really, really powerful black powder that you mix with it. In this case, was mixed with ethanol and just painted over the top of the roof. So now, after fairing it the first time, he's fairing it a second time. So whether it's white or fiberglassy or fairing compoundy is where it's been sanded. Wherever it's black like this is where it hasn't been sanded, which means it's a dip that has to be filled. Now Nico has gone over with this same fairing compound that's on the roof. It's a lot more brittle but also easier to sand and a lot smoother once sanded than the one that we used on the caulking. The one on the caulking is a lot stronger but still bendy. This one is literally just to cover up some surface layers. This is where I wish we had a smaller boat or a bigger sander. And this is where I wish I had a smaller boat. All these tiny little grooves, imagine how many there are here. They don't all have to be done, but the more that we get done, the nicer it looks. Yeah, that's what I keep telling myself. This is about as smooth as I'm gonna attempt to get the hull. We can keep going forever and ever. It's just gonna waste more time and more product, more sanding paper, and I just wanna go sailing already. Gray shows more of the imperfections, which is why we applied a bit more fairing compound in the small little imperfections and then sanded it down, which is why it looks like this. Today I'm gonna get the final layer of primer on, which is the gray one, which I've already done. It should rain tomorrow, so I won't paint yet, but when we've had a few days of nice sun, this polyurethane paint is also going to go on, and then this side will be ready.
Good morning. Yesterday when Ben finished painting this primer, it was getting dark, so he couldn't really appreciate it. Now he can really see his work. I'm very proud of him. I think he did amazing. And one thing that I wanted to say is I always dreamed on having a gray boat, but now looking at Eva, I really don't think gray is her color, so I'm happy that this is just the primer and the final color is something else that I'm very happy about.
We've moved up over here up to the roof where there's lots of black, lots of white, and it all has to be faired because the fairing compound isn't fair unless we sand it. So we've upgraded from the smalling sanding planks to one big one that Marcus and I are going to hold one side each, and see if we can get this thing faired as good as we can today.
Yo ho, yo ho.
A pirate's life for me.
Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the damage is done, take our leave and go.
If you look from the side, you can see it makes a nice curvature. However, I want to go over one more time with a little bit of fairing compound just to close the last dents. And then the last sanding paper is going to go on top of that with a, I don't know, 150 to 200, maybe even 300 grit to leave it smooth.
Ready to sail into the wind, heading west to find my reason.
Just finished lunch, full belly. Just so you know what they eat here in Brazil, it's usually rice and beans, and then you can add some sausage or chicken or beef or fish and some veggies and pasta on it. So it's really filling. Enough energy now to finish this roof. I think it'll take maybe 1-2 more hours. I hope I am overestimating it, not underestimating it. But let's get to it. I can see a few patches here. I don't know if you can see where I've been and where I haven't. But this shouldn't take too much longer, and then we can go over and finish fairing it with a light sanding paper and paint it.
I'm on the move, out into the great wide open. Look out, world, here I come. Hoist up my sails and ride the wind.
The roof over here has cured, set, catalyzed, whatever you want to call it. You put your hand over and you can't feel any lumps. I'm sure there are still going to be some. The next step is getting that big board again, 2 people, but with a way lighter or thinner grit, sanding paper, and sand everything down to make sure it's nice and flush. Ah! We'll get there.
I'm on the move, out into the great wide open. Look out, world, here I come. Hoist up my sails and ride the wind.
It is not the end of the workday yet. We're nearly there. But both Nico and I literally couldn't even hold the plywood of the sanding plank. This has been something on our list for ages. We've been postponing it, as you might realize. It's been fiberglassed and left alone. Fiberglassed, left alone. And now we finally just want to finish it, mainly because we want to finish up all the paint jobs on the boat, the exterior paint jobs like the hull and stuff, also the mast foot, because we don't want any more water coming in. And then it's like one of these things that once this is done, it is literally a 4 by 7 or 8 meter square meter piece of roof that we could almost forget about. Yeah, you can see it maybe looks like a mess from up there. Let's see if we can get down here. It is as smooth as we can get. Either way, we want to get this done so we can move over to some really cool steps. But that is tiring. Almost done with the primer. Most of this roof is looking super smooth. Now I'll show you a B-roll here of what it looks like to us. So most of it is smooth, except it's really showing us where we need to go with some fairing compound. A lot of these areas we knew already. However, this is going to show us a few more. So now literally the next step is just cover all the holes and then cover that fairing compound again and then paint, because this is saving us so many steps. I'm super happy how this is looking. It took us a long time to get here, but I'm chuffed. Very, very chuffed. We were almost gonna like not completely make it very nice because we wanted to just paint it and get in the water. However, it's worth it. I'm on this roof now. The wind's definitely picking up. I don't know what's going to happen. They announced a cyclone, so we're just going to stay here. There's no high objects around us except for the mast, of course, but we should be fine. I'll just keep monitoring the wind, the weather. Sun's out, blue sky, and dry roof. Knee pads actually, I got these yesterday because last time our knees were all open from just kneeling and sanding, and also our hands as well from the spatulas, but it's not as much fairing now, it's just these tiny gaps. Shouldn't be too hard. Like I said, with the hull you can keep fairing, but there's a point where you just have to accept it and be happy with it. This roof of the pilot house is pretty much fed, or is fed as much as we want to, so the next step is painting it with the primer, followed up by painting it with the PU paint, which is going to be the same as the hull. One thing I want to do before, it's now lunchtime, and after lunch we should be doing what I just said. However, now I want to create a kind of a waterproof mast foot over here. Now the plan is, I have shown it in a video a very long time ago, however it was removed. For us to be able to continue fiberglassing is put a ring that is fixed to the roof here, so water doesn't slide in the hole but hits the ring, goes around and comes out the back. And I'm going to put a kind of skirt which is attached to the mast, which goes over that ring that isn't attached to the deck, so the mast, if it does move a bit under tension, that the fiberglass doesn't tear. I was thinking of making it out of wood, which is why I got some hardwood in the first place. But we made it before out of wood, and of course it's tough to cut this in the right grain, so it's snapped. And I think plywood, as it's going to be resined, maybe even fiberglass, but I think just epoxy resined, primered and painted and covered with that skirt, plywood should work as well. And it's naval plywood as well, marine grade plywood, sorry. So this epoxied and painted shouldn't rot at all. And I'm going to use plywood after all. So I've sanded it all down, so I'm going to epoxy resin or glue it onto fiberglass and not the fairing compound. I've also pre-drilled everything. I don't really think you need screws, but I wanted it to really stick down. I don't even know if I'll take the screws out later. Either way, when I've put the resin on, I'm going to screw it down again. Everything's pre-drilled and it's fitting nicely. Then we'll let that cure. Maybe put another layer over the top as it's plywood. And then when that's dry, we can sand it down lightly and paint the whole thing in one go. I'm gonna go over with the primer again like we did in the beginning, and I'm gonna get this drawing up in the air and get painting. This is the roof of the superstructure with its final layer of primer on. This is one of those things that has lasted so long, taken so long, because also we learned a lot from our mistakes. We've learned a lot from YouTube comments. Thank you all for commenting and giving us advice on this. Yeah, we've got the other pilot house roof to do, which should be a lot quicker because we know how to do it now. I was really hoping to be able to give you the finished and painted job by the end of this episode. However, weather has been absolutely horrible. Like, the roof is dry here now for the first time, but the deck's still wet. I don't know if I can get you off here. Everything is still wet, and I don't want to even paint now, even though the roof is dry, because it's very humid. They are predicting some nice few sunny days in about 4 days, so hopefully next week you can see this roof completely finished, and this is going to be a big milestone. These episodes would not be possible if it wasn't for these amazing people. Thank you so much, Dwayne, Wiley, Joseph, James, Danny and Morton, for giving us a super thanks. Mike, Rai, Michael and David, welcome to the Patreon crew. Thank you guys so much. And thank you Roman, Bruno and Mark for supporting us through PayPal. See you all next Sunday.